this episode of Pope's Projects. I talk in front of the car, I talk inside the car, I talk behind the car, and drive all of 2 feet. Welcome back to Pope's Projects and Project 818 SRX. Now, I haven't worked on this car, it's now April. I haven't worked on this car since September when I filmed the last video. I've been between working non-stop all fall, and then I did a 2-month garage cleanup followed by working on the rat rod, and bam, it is springtime. Now, when I stopped working on this and put it under a cover back in September, as far as I was concerned, it was ready to fire up, do some test drives, and then go get inspected. Now, the last time it was actually started was on the first drive video, which was almost 2 years ago. Probably 2 years ago and the next month that I fired it up and took it for that test drive. And I believe it was a year prior to that, or 8 months prior to that, I had done my first start video. So back in the summer, I actually drained all the fuel out, or I should say sucked it all out. So there's still probably a little bit left in there. There's definitely some in the lines. Pretty sure I used a fuel stabilizer, but not 100% sure. So for that reason, I did not want to install my new injectors. I have a whole new fuel system to go into this, but I didn't want to install that yet. I also didn't want to tear into that until I just want to get it on the road. I want to get it registered. So we're going to throw some new fuel in here and fire it out and see what happens. Now, for those that aren't familiar with rotaries, they're kind of unique in that they naturally consume oil. It's not like a piston engine that is burning oil. From the factory, they have a little oil metering pump that takes oil from the oil pan and drops it down into the combustion chamber to lubricate the combustion chamber and the seals. From the factory, there was a balance. Like, they couldn't have you having to put a quart of oil in every time you filled up. People would be running their engines out of oil, and it also isn't great for emissions to be burning that much oil. So I think that they were on the low side of how much oil could be used. Like, I mean, any less than what was coming out of the oil metering pump probably would have been causing damage, and they certainly could benefit from more. I know the race teams for Mazda used a lot of premix in their fuel instead of the oil metering pump. So a lot of guys who modify their cars even get rid of the oil metering pump and just premix their fuel with 2-stroke oil. That's my plan with this. The gas that was in it was mixed, and the gas that's going to go in it now is going to be mixed. There's different opinions. There's no exact ratio that I'm aware of that Mazda has announced, because if Mazda gave us a production vehicle with the oil metering pump, they're not going to tell us how much oil to throw into our gas and hurt their emissions numbers or whatever. So you basically just got to go off the forums and try to find who's the experienced guys and get an answer. It seems to be, if you have your oil metering pump, adding about a half an ounce to a gallon of fuel is a good extra protection. Without the oil metering pump, anywhere from 1 ounce per gallon to 1.5 ounces per gallon seems to be the norm. Some guys go as high as 2 ounces per gallon in their track cars. I guess at a certain point you'll start getting some smoke. I'm not really going to worry about that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and just put in 2 ounces per gallon. Now, I've got 94 octane from here in Edmonton, and I'm actually going to bump this up. Not that I want to tune the car in race fuel, it's just this is my first time tuning. What if this map is nowhere close to where it needs to be? I want a little extra protection. Again, for those who don't know much about rotaries, there's a knock sensor on these, but it's kind of irrelevant, because as soon as you get knock, as soon as you get detonation, you're blowing seals. You're definitely, it turns catastrophic quick, and I don't want that to happen. So until I know that my air fuel ratios are close, or that at least the ECU is compensating, I'm going to bump it up a little bit. Now, back in the day, octane boosters were popular. I think we all knew they were kind of snake oil. But I recently seen this at my local parts store and never really thought anything much of it. I just assumed it's more snake oil. And then I was watching one of Speed Academy's videos where Sasha from On Point Dyno, whose opinion I don't disregard at all, or take in high regard, I should say. And he uses that in his VQ, the highest natural aspirator VQ in the world, as far as I know. So I looked into it a little more, and I guess it's pretty good. So it's race gas concentrate. It's not sponsored or anything. It was $30 Canadian for this. This was 32 ounces. I'm going to be adding basically half of that to 5 gallons, which is going to get me 101 octane, which I feel a lot better about, and it's going to give me that little extra protection to make me feel a little more comfortable about starting my tuning experiences. And who knows, maybe in the future I'll want to up the boost when I go to the track, and as opposed to buying race gas, I can just throw some of this in with the 94 and get a little extra protection on track. And then just two-stroke oil. This is Walmart brand. I know some guys get pretty excited about buying the rotary specific stuff, but there's different opinions on that. From what I understand, this TCW3 code or standard is what you're looking for. The RX8 guys are looking for something else because of the catalytic converter, but I'll be switching to this in the RX8 as well once I get rid of the cat. So there just happens to be 10 ounces left in this guy, so I'll dump that in there. So the goal for today is, well, one, to start it again because it's been so long that I haven't heard it. But when I had it running before, I had no concept really of how to tune idle on the AEM Infinity. Fortunately, there's enough compensation built into the program that if you turn the feedback up to max, it will idle fine. And it was, but that's a poor tune because idle wasn't tuned. It was just compensating, and it was compensating to the max amount and still not a perfect idle. So I apologize for the cell phone video and audio, but I couldn't get the screen capture to work. This is the first start video or first start log. So as you can see here, once it starts up, idle feedback, hang on, it is at 0 because I turned it off. It should be at 1500 RPMs, but it's not. It's at 2500 RPMs. So you can see it's way out to lunch. So now if I open up, so now in this one we can see idle feedback. Here we go. So idle feedback's at 25%. It should be at 1400 RPM. It's at 1400 RPM. So the feedback can mask a really poor idle, and that's what I'm talking about there. The idea is that you want this to be low. So since then, AEM has released 3 videos on how to tune the idle with the Infinity, and fortunately enough, those were even done on a 93 to 95 RX-7, the FD. Now I also know that their FD at AEM is also a single turbo, so it's very similar. The big difference being that my intake manifold is heavily ported, and I'm running a drive-by-wire GM throttle body, which is much bigger. So the idle is not going to be the same, but what I did is I just copied the numbers from their video, and I will leave the feedback on, and then hopefully I'll see that the feedback percentage is a lot less. I'll try to do a screen capture so you guys can see this, and from there, I'll turn off the feedback and then adjust it as they describe in that video. So if you're having issues tuning your AEM Infinity, there are some good videos. Also Horsepower Academy, or High Performance Academy out of New Zealand. They also have a few videos on tuning the Infinity and a couple on RX-7s. So that's the first thing, is get her started, tune to idle. I couldn't get my fans to turn on at the right temperature last time. I could get them to force them on with the program, but for some reason they weren't turning on. So I'm going to set them at a lot lower. I've made some changes there, and hopefully I get the fan set in. Basically, I need it to be able to just sit here and idle, not overheat, and not require any correction to idle perfectly. From there, hopefully I'll start revving it up. You know, maybe we'll see some flames, not sure. And we'll start going through the tuning and the VE map just here at idle. And then the next move would be driving. Now before I can drive it, I've also since installed this transmission, and I did have a bit of issue trying to get all of the air out of the new slave cylinder. I should have bled it on the bench first, but I didn't. So I'm not 100% sure that it's the clutch is gonna completely release from the flywheel. So I do have the rear wheels jacked up, and once I get the idle sorted out, I can, you know, test and make sure that the clutch is gonna work fine, and then we'll start taking it a couple of drives up and down the road. Good luck, right? Yeah. Either way, I'm gonna be filming it, so if it all goes wrong and blows up, you guys will see that too. I just might take longer to edit it if that happens. So what I'm looking at there now is, if I was at the idle screen, and I'm noticing that my injector feedback is quite a bit. My idle feedback's good, but my injector feedback is a little high. We're getting our target air fuel ratios, but we're having to compensate a lot in order to do so. And if you look down here, the VE that we're, you know, the volumetric efficiency we're saying the engine is not what the ECU is. The ECU calculates what it should be in order to eliminate this feedback. So they're telling me it should come down to 49 from 60. So if you see, as I'm going along there, I'm changing it, and see now once we get, you know, it tells me it wants 42, I give it 42, and then usually you got to tweak it. Once you get it close, you got to tweak it a little bit more. But now we can see our feedback is at 0, and our air fuel ratio is bang on what it needs to be. Also now at this point, we look at our engine speed. She's right at 1,000 and 1,080, and we're requesting 1,050. However, now my idle feedback is helping me get there as well, because I don't realize at this point that my my base positions are just way off. But I get there. So I got it running. I was having some issues with just fighting with the idle tuning and trying to wrap my head around it. And the coolant fan wasn't coming on right, but I guess I did some reading on the forum, and turns out there's a AC clutch switch, kind of. Anyway, I found that in the Infinity tuner and turned that off, so now the fan works as it's supposed to. I'm not sure my coolant sensor is the most accurate. It's the factory Mazda 1, and it's reading at like 100 degrees Celsius, and the thermostat isn't even open yet. Now yesterday I did get the thermostat open. Today it didn't open. It was reading higher, so I got a feeling just where that's located that it's just reading steam. So I don't know if I'm going to try to find a better location or just change it out for an AEM sensor. Anyway, it's getting late now, so I'm not going to be running this loud engine here in our little nice neighborhood anymore. So I decided, since it's all warmed up, I'm going to do a compression test. Now I know my rear rotor is down at compression. Just using the temp gauge, it's 40 degrees Celsius cooler on the outside. And I knew before that it was down. My hope is that premix heavily, drive it, see if those apex seals can free up. I was able to get them freed up, and compression came up 2-3 years ago whenever I did my first start on this. But since then it's just sat, so it's a good chance they're all seized up again anyway. So we're going to test the back rotor first. The trailing plugs are out on both. That's the top plug. This is plugged into the rear trailing plug hole, and I had the fuses pulled for both ignition and fuel. So the fuel pump shouldn't turn on. Let's find out. This is a rotary compression tester. Nice piece. I picked this up before buying the RX-8. So it says begin cranking. Actually not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Still not great. So we got 62, 66, 68. Corrected is 70. It flashes so fast because it's corrected at altitude. $79, $85, $87. $79, $85, $87. Maybe that's the good rotor. It's only turning at 200 RPM. It's not a lot. It's probably why it doesn't fire up just like that. Maybe it's the Subaru starter. Now let's try the front rotor. Okay, let's try the front rotor. $102, $91, $99. Both of those numbers are not that bad. Now, I just realized I didn't hold the throttle wide open when doing that. And I'm supposed to. So let's try it again. Oh, wait, I should probably turn this off and back on again. Okay. Try this again. Got a little more RPM out of it. 106, 94, 100. The numbers actually were reading low because I never had a wide open throttle. lot of good things happened yesterday. One, I got the engine idling pretty good. I got the coolant system. I was a little worried that I was actually getting air into my cooling system, because when I'd pull the cap off later it would be really low, and I was thinking, okay, it's probably an O-ring gone on the engine, so it's just pushing exhaust gas in. So I got one of those little leak testers, and I wasn't getting any exhaust gas into the coolant, which is awesome. So what I did figure out is I have two rad caps. One's in the front, and that one's actually a 16 psi, and then one in the back, which is my high point, which is a 13 psi. But for some reason, the little bleeder nipple on the side of the front one would just push coolant out, and then the top side would be low. And because the high point, like where my rad cap is on the back, is not much higher than the sensor, I'm pretty sure that it was overheating fast. I think I hit like 107 Celsius yesterday, or the day before, and I was getting pretty worried. That's pretty warm, but I think it was just reading steam. So when I started topping up the coolant in the back, I was noticing that it was just going up the front as it was warming up with no pressure in the system. So I'm not quite sure why that cap in the front isn't doing its job, but what I decided was just plug the little nipple so it can't bleed off pressure in the front, which is fine because I have a 13 psi in the back. So while that front one wasn't holding the 16 psi it should have been, it's not an issue now because it can't go anywhere. So I just have the one now that can actually bleed pressure, which is in the back. So I was able to get it to idle just fine, and it'll go up to I think 85 or 87. Then the fans cut in, it'll bring it down to 80 to 83. I think I got the fans set to shut off at like 83, but it'll sometimes cool way down to 80, and I'll have to play with that and find that good spot. So we know the compression is good, O-rings are good, the cooling system's good, idling fine. Let's take it for a drive. Put the GoPro on, everything was ready to go, and I had 4 forward gears and no reverse. Yeah. Next time on Pope's Projects, I tear the whole ass off the car, get it fixed, and finally hit some boost, and then realize I have the wrong axles and they leak.